"I smell something," she said, almost playfully. "Not the soup, a woman's scent." Tundday dropped his spoon slightly too hard. "Jane, I beg, you dey come with this your FBI behavior again." She smiled. "Relax. I'm just saying. Maybe it's from the laundry I did. I washed my bed sheets. The detergent is strong." "I see." She didn't press further. She didn't need to. He was unraveling on his own.
Well, well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you need to subscribe.
The generator's hum in the background was almost comforting, a soft, rhythmic buzz that filled the silence in Jane's small flat in Surulere. The lights had just come back, but she hadn't turned off the gen. She didn't even notice. Jane sat at her dressing table, carefully dabbing a bit of powder beneath her eyes. She was going out later, nothing fancy, just Tunde's place. He hadn't asked her to come, but he never really did. Still, she wanted to see him. She stared at her reflection for a long moment. Her face was pretty. People always said that she was too pretty for a chubby girl. She didn't mind being big. Not really. But she did mind being unseen. She touched the small gold necklace at her neck. A birthday gift, not from Tundday, of course, from herself. Then her phone buzzed. A message. "Tundday, make sure you come with that 300K we talked about. My guy said the car part fit Don go by tomorrow." No hello. No, how are you? Just a request, like she was his bank. Jane sighed, stood up, and walked to her wardrobe. She picked out a peach-colored blouse, the one he once said, looked nice on her, and paired it with dark jeans. She checked her phone again. No follow-up message. It had been 3 years with Tundday. 3 long years of waiting, adjusting, forgiving, excusing. They weren't officially engaged. He had never introduced her to his parents. He didn't talk about the future, unless it was about his own dreams, his hustle, his investments, his next big move. Jane listened. She always listened. But lately, she was beginning to wonder if he ever really heard her. At work, her colleagues called her Mummy Jane, always checking in, always bringing extra food, always patient. At home, her neighbors greeted her warmly. She was liked, even loved. But none of that mattered when Tundday looked through her like she was just there. Still, she would go to his place tonight. She would give him the money. She would cook something. They would watch football, or rather, he would and she would scroll through her phone, pretending not to feel invisible. She always told herself things would change. One day, he would see me differently. One day, he'd say, "Jane, you're the one. Let's build something together." But even as she smoothed down her blouse in the mirror, she knew deep down that that day was never coming. She picked up her bag, smiled at herself in the mirror one more time, and went to chase love again. It was nearly 8 p.m. by the time Jane arrived at Tunday's compound in Yaba. The sky had turned a sleepy blue, streetlights blinking reluctantly to life. She balanced a small food flask in one hand and her handbag in the other, adjusting the nylon bag that held a bottle of malt and some suya. The gateman, Musa, gave her a knowing nod as he opened the gate. "Welcome, Auntie Jane." She forced a smile. "Good evening, Musa." Climbing the stairs to his flat, Jane rehearsed how she would greet him soft but not needy, cheerful but not overbearing. Tundday didn't like too much talk when he was tired. She knocked twice and waited. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. A moment later, the door swung open. Tundday stood shirtless, boxers slung low on his hips, eyes slightly red. His face registered mild surprise before settling into a blank stare. "I thought you changed your mind about coming," he said flatly, stepping aside to let her in. "I called. You didn't pick. I was sleeping," he muttered. She walked in quietly. The living room was scattered gamepad on the floor, a half-eaten shawarma on the table, and the stale smell of sweat and indomie lingering in the air. "I brought food," she offered, lifting the flask. Tundday shrugged. "I ate already." A tiny sting pricked her chest. She placed the flask on the dining table anyway. "You okay?" she asked, sitting beside him on the couch. "Yeah, just tired. Been running around all day." She nodded and reached for his hand, placing it softly between hers. His fingers didn't curl back. Jane tried to focus on the television, where a comedy skit played on YouTube. Tundday barely glanced at it instead. He scrolled through his phone, occasionally smirking at something only he could see. His laughter, when it came, was brief and distant. "I transferred the 300K in your account," she said after a while. His eyes didn't leave the screen. "Nice one. No thank you. Not even eye contact." Jane swallowed hard and tried not to show it. They sat like that for another 20 minutes, her pretending to watch television, him fully immersed in his phone. She could see his screen in reflection. DMs open, a girl's selfie, laughing emojis. Jane turned away. "Tundday," she said softly. "Can we talk?" He sighed dramatically. "About what now?" She hesitated. "I just feel like, I don't know. Lately we've been distant. I do so much to be here for you, and sometimes it feels like I'm invisible." Tundday dropped his phone and turned to her, irritation rising. "Jane, beg. Not tonight. I told you I'm tired. Why must we always have these kinds of talks when I'm trying to relax?" She blinked. "It's just... See, you overthink too much. That's your problem. I'd here with you, Abby. What else do you want?" The finality in his voice was like a slammed door. Jane nodded slowly. "Nothing." She stood up, walked to the kitchen, and quietly dished the food she brought into his plates. Even if he wouldn't eat now, at least it would be there. She wasn't sure why she did that. It wasn't about the food, or the 300K, or even the silence. It was about something deeper, a fear that if she stopped trying, there would be nothing left between them. As she left the kitchen, she saw Tundday had already picked up his phone again. "Good night," she said quietly. He barely looked up. "You are going already?" "I have work tomorrow." "No wahala. Lock the door when get downstairs." She nodded, closed the door behind her. And as she walked back into the Lagos night, her hands empty, her heart even more so, something inside her began to question if this was all love was meant to be. Jane didn't remember how the mixer ended. The hall had been filled with too many voices, too many business cards, and too many people faking excitement about synergy. She had gone because her boss said it was good networking for the company's branding team, and Jane, like always, went where she was told. She made small talk, smiled, and stood near the refreshment table long enough to be forgotten. That was until Sharon walked in. Black jumpsuit, pointed heels, a silver pin holding her braids in place like a crown. She didn't just enter the room, she arrived. The way people turned to look at her was almost involuntary, like she carried gravity in her walk. Jane watched from across the room as Sharon took her seat on the panel. Confidence, effortless. She introduced herself, business consultant, brand strategist, founder of a firm that worked with 3 of the biggest banks in Nigeria and also runs a women empowerment association. When the Q&A started, Jane didn't raise her hand, but she listened. Every word Sharon spoke carried weight, clear, no fluff, no fear of stepping on anyone's ego. When someone, a man in a poorly ironed blazer, asked her if she ever felt intimidated in boardrooms full of men, Sharon smiled. "I don't walk into rooms to ask for permission. I walk in because I belong there." That answer stayed with Jane all night. It was at the drinks lounge after the event that they finally met. Sharon was standing alone, sipping something bright and citrusy, her phone glowing in one hand. Jane almost walked past her, but something made her stop. "Hi," Jane said nervously. "I just wanted to say, your session was really powerful." Sharon turned, eyes scanning Jane briefly before breaking into a small smile. "Thank you. You were in the back row, right?" Jane blinked. "Wow, you noticed?" "I always notice people who don't try to be seen." They talked about work, about how exhausting Lagos can be. Jane mentioned she ran a thrift store online on the side. Sharon nodded with interest. She didn't condescend or offer fake advice. She listened. Then the conversation shifted naturally to life beyond work. Jane found herself opening up about Tundday. She didn't mean to, but somehow it all spilled out. The borrowed money, the indifference, the loneliness. Sharon listened quietly. Not once did she interrupt, but her face told the story, her raised brow, her clenched jaw, the occasional shake of her head. "You've been with him 3 years?" she asked, when Jane paused. Jane nodded, embarrassed. "Yeah, I know it sounds like you've been shrinking yourself for someone who isn't even looking." Jane blinked. "Sorry if that's harsh," Sharon said, softening. But it baffles me how women like you, intelligent, warm, giving, let themselves bleed for men who can't even offer a plaster. Jane looked down at her drink. It's complicated. No, Jane, it's not. You're just scared. You think if you leave, there won't be anyone else. I'm not exactly the ideal, Jane said, voice low. I know I'm not slim. I'm not flashy. I don't turn heads. Sharon scoffed gently. The problem isn't your body. The problem is your belief. Somewhere along the line, someone told you that you had to earn love, that you weren't enough by default, and you believed it. You've been loyal to someone who has never been loyal to you, Sharon said. That's not love, that's survival. I know you don't see it now, Sharon added, but there's a version of you out there, confident, full, joyful, who wouldn't even answer Tunday's call. Jane smiled faintly. She sounds like a dream. She's not a dream. She's just waiting for you to choose her. They exchanged numbers before they left. Sharon hugged her, brief, warm, intentional. That night, back in her room, Jane just stared at her ceiling for hours, hearing one sentence on loop in her head. You've been shrinking yourself for someone who isn't even looking. Saturday felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that made Jane think too much, feel too much. She had cleaned her room twice already, washed her wigs, folded clothes that didn't need folding, all just to silence her thoughts. But they wouldn't go away. Not Sharon's voice, not Tunday's silence, not the weight of loving someone who rarely showed up. At about noon, she packed a flask of egusi soup and simo, added chilled malt, and tucked it neatly into her bag. She hadn't told Tundday she was coming. Experience had taught her that calling ahead often ended with excuses. Better to show up. She wore a soft yellow top and black jeans that hugged her curves gently. She added a dash of lip gloss, looked at herself in the mirror, and whispered, "He'll be happy to see me." But somewhere deep down, she wasn't so sure. The moment she entered his compound, something felt off. It was too quiet. The curtains in his window were drawn shut, and his car, an old Camry he loved like a baby, was parked just slightly crooked, as though he rushed in. Jane knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder. After a long pause, the door finally creaked open. Tundday stood there, shirtless, towel draped over his shoulder, skin still damp. He looked surprised, too surprised. "Jane, what's up?" "I brought food," she smiled, lifting the nylon bag. His eyes darted behind him, quick and sharp. "You should have called first," he said, blocking the doorway slightly with his body. "I was just about to nap." Jane tilted her head. "Can I come in?" A moment's hesitation, then a forced smile. "Yeah, sure." She stepped in slowly. The house looked normal at first glance. Remote on the couch, plates in the sink, AC humming faintly. The instant Jane stepped into Tunday's flat, the smell hit her. Not stew, not air freshener. Perfume, sweet, expensive, and unfamiliar. It lingered in the air like a secret too loud to ignore. She blinked, pretending not to notice, and walked in slowly. Tundday, still in his towel, moved ahead of her, too quickly, like someone trying to stay in control of the space. "You look fresh," she said, eyes drifting around. "Just showered," he mumbled, barely meeting her gaze. "Was about to nap before you showed up." She nodded, smiling gently. "Well, you can nap after eating." He didn't answer, just scratched the back of his neck and hovered by the hallway. That's when she noticed the guest bathroom door was shut. So was the bedroom door. Both tightly closed, no sound. But the silence itself felt loud. She glanced at him. He noticed. "Why are you looking at the bedroom like it abhors a ghost?" he snapped too quickly. She laughed softly. "Relax. Can't someone admire your fine doors again?" He didn't laugh. Instead, he picked up a shirt from the chair and slipped it on. "Wettin you bring?" "Egusi and simo," she said. "Your favorite." She walked to the kitchen and began plating the food. Her hands were steady, but her heart wasn't. The perfume was too strong. Someone else had been here, maybe was still here. But she said nothing, not yet. When she returned to the living room with the tray, Tundday was already sitting at the edge of the couch, posture stiff, eyes flicking between her and the hallway like a man waiting for the floor to collapse. She placed the tray on the center table and sat across from him, hands folded in her lap. He reached for the spoon. His hand trembled slightly. "You're not eating?" he asked without looking at her. "I'm fine," she replied calmly. "I ate before leaving the house. This was for you." He nodded, then began to eat. One swallow, then another. Slow, deliberate. Sweat gathered at his forehead before the second bite. His eyes stayed low, fixed on the plate like it held a gun. "Hot?" she asked, tilting her head. "The food. Is it hot?" He wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "A bit." Jane sat silently, watching him. Every few seconds, she noticed his eyes flick toward the hallway. Quick, guilty glances, like a man watching a closed door with a prayer on his lips. The AC was on, yet he kept sweating. "Tundday," she said, voice soft. "Why are you so uncomfortable?" He forced a laugh. "You read too much meaning into everything. Can't I eat again?" She leaned back on the couch, crossed her legs, and looked around, then stood up slowly and walked to the window. The smell, the perfume was stronger near the hallway. She stood there, quiet, letting the tension hang. Then she turned back to him. "I smell something," she said, almost playfully. "Not the soup, a woman's scent." Tundday dropped his spoon slightly too hard. "Jane, I beg, you dey come with this your FBI behavior again." She smiled. "Relax. I'm just saying. Maybe it's from the laundry I did. I washed my bed sheets. The detergent is strong." "I see." She didn't press further. She didn't need to. He was unraveling on his own. Somewhere, behind one of those closed doors, a lady, probably barefoot and panicking, was hiding, holding her breath, clutching her phone, praying the other woman would leave. And Jane? She chose silence. Not because she didn't know, but because the pain hadn't finished forming yet. It was still taking shape like a knife being sharpened. When he finished eating, she packed the tray and took it to the kitchen. He didn't offer to help. He couldn't even speak. And when she returned, she picked up her bag. "You're leaving already?" he asked, almost too eagerly. "Yes," she said. "I've overstayed my welcome." He nodded, relieved. She opened the door, paused for one long second, then turned back. "You should air out the place," she said. "Smells like a stranger's been here." Tundday froze. She didn't wait for a reply. The second Jane stepped out of the gate, her legs moved on instinct, fast, steady, without looking back. But her heart wasn't done. She didn't go home. She kept walking. Past the next compound, past the kiosk with biscuits and recharge cards. She stopped only when she found the perfect spot, an abandoned ironing stand tucked beside a broken fence. From there, she had a full view of Tundday's flat. The sun had dipped lower now. Evening shadows crawled across the street, softening the chaos of Lagos into something quieter, but not calmer. Jane pulled out her phone and held it steady. Camera lens up, silent mode on. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even shaking. She was just ready. For the truth, for proof. For the moment, she could no longer pretend. A few minutes passed. Nothing. Then, the creak of an old iron door. Jane zoomed in. There he was. Tundday stepped onto the balcony, wearing a black shirt now, his eyes scanning the street with the nervous energy of a man trying to outsmart karma. He looked left, then right, leaned over the rail slightly. He wasn't stretching. He wasn't admiring the view. He was searching. For her. Jane didn't move. He lingered for a few seconds, clearly unsure whether the coast was clear, then stepped back inside quickly, almost guiltily. She smiled faintly. "Got you." Seconds turned to minutes. Then it happened. The gate creaked open. A slim, brown-skinned woman in tight jeans and a cropped tee slipped out hurriedly, glancing around like a rabbit in the bush. Her wig was slightly slanted, one earring missing. She held her phone to her chest, like it could shield her from shame. Annabelle. She looked upset, not just embarrassed, but furious, like a woman who had been promised silence and nearly got exposed. Jane didn't speak. She didn't approach. She didn't scream, or throw stones, or demand answers. She just hit record. Annabelle's car was parked just outside the compound. She unlocked it, climbed in quickly, and disappeared into traffic with a gust of wind and unresolved tension. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a few seconds, Jane stood motionless in her small apartment, the quiet pressing against her like a hand on her throat. The only sound was the low buzz of the fridge and the faint hum of a neighbor's generator outside. Then her bag dropped to the floor, and she crumbled. She didn't just cry, she wailed. The kind of cry that came from the bones, that dragged years of silence, suppressed doubt, and swallowed pain up from the pit of her stomach. She sank to her knees in the middle of the room and screamed. Why? It tore through her like fire. Tears soaked her blouse. Her throat went hoarse, and still she couldn't stop. She cried for every "I love you" she said that was never returned with action. She cried for every weekend she spent cooking, waiting, hoping. She cried for shrinking herself, over and over again, just to fit into a love that never made room for her. Her whole body shook. The look on Tunday's face, the girl Annabelle rushing out like a thief. His lies, his sweat, his silence. How could she have been so blind? She reached for her pillow and clutched it to her chest, rocking slowly on the floor, breathing in short, painful gasps. Memories kept flashing behind her eyes like an unwanted film reel, and through the sobs came the shame. But right behind that came the anger. By the time her tears finally slowed, she was lying flat on the cold tile, her cheeks wet and puffy, her breath shallow. She picked up her phone, opened the video again, watched it from beginning to end. Then she whispered to herself, voice raspy but firm, "Never again." You see, long before the perfume, long before the lies started smelling louder than the truth, there was the 5 million. It was 1 year into their relationship. Tundday had come over with that soft, confident smile that made Jane forget how many red flags he already waved. He sat across from her at the dining table, phone in hand, showing screenshots and graphs from a sure guy, a forex merchant who had helped one of his friends turn 500K into 1.2 million in just 6 weeks. "Babe," he had said, "this is the kind of move we need to be making now. I know you've been saving for your thrift expansion, and I swear this will flip that money double. 50% returns in 3 months. Imagine that's 6.5 million back." Jane had hesitated. She worked too hard for her savings, selling clothes from her room, packaging orders at midnight, surviving on data subscriptions and dreams. But Tundday wasn't just some guy, at least not then. He was her man, her future. They had talked about building something together, opening a proper store, registering a business name, becoming a power couple. So against every instinct that whispered no, she nodded. "I'll transfer the 5 million tomorrow morning," she said softly. His eyes lit up. He kissed her forehead and called her my ride or die. The money disappeared the same way the affection did, quietly, with no explanation. 3 months passed, no returns, no receipts, no explanations. At first, Tundday said the trader needed more time. Then he said the guy traveled. Then, nothing. When Jane brought it up the 4th time, he snapped. "Why do you talk about this money like I collected it and spent it on myself? Didn't I tell you the guy lost the investment? You think I'm happy about it? You they make me feel like a beggar." Jane was stunned. She wasn't shouting. She was asking. But suddenly, she became the enemy. After that day, the topic became taboo. She carried it alone, the loss, the guilt, the stupidity. She cried about it twice, first in the shower, then later while ironing her clothes for work. Quiet tears, angry ones. She told no one, not even Sharon. Because how do you explain loaning 5 million to a man who wasn't even your fiancé? She kept waiting for him to bring it up. He never did. No apology, no plan, no remorse. It was like the money and the trust never existed. And so Jane adjusted, but she was stupidly in love, and money wasn't going to come between her and the love of her life. Back to the present, by morning, Jane was done crying. Her eyes were swollen, her pillow damp, and her throat dry, but her mind was clear. Something in her had clicked. She looked at herself in the mirror. No makeup, bonnet still on, lips chapped, and whispered, "Never again." She wasn't going to be the girl who broke and begged. She wasn't going to let Tundday walk away like he didn't destroy her. She wasn't going to drown quietly in pity while he laughed with Annabelle in the same shirt she bought him. She wanted justice. No, she wanted revenge. Not the kind that came with drama or scandal. The kind that stung. Quietly, strategically, smart. So she picked up her phone, scrolled down to Sharon, and hit call. It rang twice before Sharon picked up. "Jane?" Her voice was alert, sharp. "I need your help," Jane said calmly. "And I'm done pretending I'm okay." There was a pause. Then, "Come to my office." Sharon's office was in Lekki Phase 1. Glass doors, cool air, and clean, focused energy. The kind of place where ideas turned into millions and egos got checked at the door. When Jane walked in, she looked different. Not in clothes, she still wore a simple blouse and jeans, but in energy. Her silence had weight. Her eyes were tired, but focused. Sharon stood from behind her desk, arms open. "You okay?" Jane didn't answer. She walked in, sat, and for the first time in years, poured it all out. She told her everything, from the borrowed 5 million to the forgotten birthdays, the gaslighting, the cancelled plans, the tears she cried in secret, the debt she collected just to make Tunde's dreams work, the way he used her, over and over again. She even told her about the night she waited outside his gate, how she watched Annabelle rush out like a guilty shadow. Sharon didn't interrupt. She listened, every word, every silence between words. By the time Jane was done, her voice had gone soft. "I don't want to just walk away. Not this time. I want him to feel what it's like to be used, lied to, humiliated." Sharon leaned back slowly, eyes scanning her like she was meeting her for the first time. "Good," Sharon said, her voice sharp and cool. "Now we're speaking the same language." Jane blinked. "You're not going to tell me to forgive him?" "Hell no. We're not in church. We're in Lagos." They both laughed, the first laugh Jane had let out in days. "I don't want to get messy," Jane said, "but I want him to pay." Sharon nodded. "Then we're going to give him a taste of his own game, and we'll do it in a way he won't even see coming." Jane sat straighter. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Sharon smiled. A couple odd days later, Tundday hadn't slept well since the incident. But he wasn't losing sleep over Jane. He was losing sleep over Annabelle. She hadn't answered his calls in 2 days. Her texts were dry, one-word replies. The last time he saw her face, it was through the car window as she zoomed off, tight-lipped, furious. Tundday had messed up, and this time he knew it, and he wasn't ready to give up. He always thought he could manage the chaos, juggle Jane's loyalty and Annabelle's mystery like a man who had it all under control, until the balance shattered. So he decided to act fast. He sent Annabelle a message that afternoon. "Let me take you to dinner, just us. I want to talk, honestly, no games." She replied with a cold, "What for?" He followed with a voice note. Soft voice, slowed down tone. "Because I'm ready to stop being an idiot. Please, just give me tonight." She read it, waited an hour, then replied. 8 p.m. sharp. Tundday picked a fancy restaurant in Victoria Island, candlelight, piano music, fake roses on the table. He wore a crisp white shirt, clean loafers, and sprayed cologne like a man going into war. Annabelle arrived in a red satin dress that didn't beg for attention, it commanded it. She sat down without smiling. "I'm here, talk." Tundday exhaled and leaned forward. "I messed up." Silence. "I shouldn't have brought you into my mess. You deserve better than being hidden like a side chick. I don't even know how it got this bad." Still, Annabelle said nothing. But she didn't walk away either. "I've been thinking," Tundday continued, "and I'm done." Done with what? With Jane, with lying, with messing around like I don't know what I want. He reached into his pocket, brought out a small black box, opened it. A ring, silver, simple, elegant. Annabelle gasped. "Are you joking?" "I'm not. I want to move forward with you. No more drama, no more side stories. I've made my mistakes too many, but I'm ready to be a better man. For you." She looked at him long and hard. "What about Jane?" "She's in the past," he said, voice steady. "I told her it's over. I should have done it earlier, but now I'm here. I'm choosing you." For a moment, she looked like she might throw the ring at him, but she didn't. Instead, slowly, almost reluctantly, she nodded and said, "Okay." Tundday smiled wide, reached for her hand. "You said yes?" Annabelle looked him dead in the eye and said, "Yes." That night, Tundday slept like a king. Sharon stood by the tall window in her office, arms folded, eyes focused on the Lagos skyline beyond. But her mind wasn't on traffic or meetings, it was on Jane, on pain, on memories that still stung, no matter how polished her heels were today. She knew what heartbreak looked like. She had lived it. Once, Sharon had loved a man who drained her emotionally, gaslit her, cheated, and still made her feel like the broken one. She had cried into her pillow, worn full makeup to hide swollen eyes at work, and once begged a man to stay who didn't even remember her birthday. That version of Sharon was long gone. Now she ran Women Rise Africa, a growing women's empowerment group with branches in 3 Nigerian cities. They held healing workshops, supported female founders, and exposed predatory partners who used love as a weapon. Their motto, "No woman is disposable." And when Jane walked into her life, Sharon had seen her former self in that quiet, shrinking energy. Now, she wasn't just helping a friend, she was protecting another woman from becoming another story, whispered in shame. Life moved on as it always does. And though the scar was still there, Jane no longer bled. With Sharon's help and the unwavering support from the women at Women Rise Africa, Jane began again. From scratch. No savings, no man. Just pain, purpose, and a pile of notebooks filled with ideas. They didn't just offer her words, they gave her tools. A free business strategy session with a top-tier branding expert. Free graphics for her online store. A laptop donation from a widowed businesswoman who said, "This helped me feed my kids. Use it to feed your dream." And Sharon? Sharon cleared out one of the back rooms in her office and let Jane use it as her mini showroom rent-free. Jane rebranded, changed the name of her thrift store, took professional photos of her inventory, started making videos, showing her face, telling her story. She no longer begged for validation. She was building her own table. By the 3rd month, she was getting tagged on Instagram daily. Her store trended on TikTok. Women from Ghana, Kenya, even the UK began placing orders. And Jane? She smiled again, not the forced smile of survival, but the deep, quiet kind that comes when you know you're finally safe and seen. She didn't check Tunde's Instagram anymore. She no longer asked, "What if?" She stopped blaming herself for loving someone who didn't know how to love back. In less than 6 months, the girl who once begged to be noticed had become the woman who couldn't be ignored. While Jane was stitching her life back together piece by piece, Tundday was stitching together suits for groomsmen. The wedding was set to be massive. Annabelle wanted something bold, glamorous, and unforgettable, and Tundday, desperate to prove he was a changed man, said yes to everything. A hall in Lekki Phase 1, a wedding planner, a pre-wedding shoot, bridal shower at a private villa, live band, red carpet, champagne towers. "This wedding has to shut Lagos down," Annabelle told the planner. And Tundday? He just nodded, smiled, and kept swiping his card. The day had arrived. Saturday morning, clear skies, blazing sun, and Lagos buzzing like a beehive. Tundday stood in front of the mirror in his hotel suite, dressed in a custom white agbada with gold embroidery. His best man was adjusting his feeler while the photographer snapped away. He looked perfect, but beneath the fabric, he was sweating, not from nerves, from debt. He had borrowed over 40 million to complete wedding costs. Still owed a decorator. Still hadn't balanced the caterer's bill. Even the dowry, which he had insisted on paying alone to prove himself, had emptied his account. But none of that mattered today, because today he was going to show the world that he had won. The convoy rolled out of the hotel around 10:15 a.m. 3 Benzes, 2 Range Rovers, 1 open-roof Rolls for drama. By the time they arrived at the venue, a floral-drenched event center in Lekki phones were already flashing. Instagram stories were popping. Hashtags were trending. Inside, the hall looked like something out of a music video. White roses, chandeliers, a 6-tier cake, soft jazz in the background, wedding guests dripping in lace and diamonds. The Alaga was already warming up. The drinks were flowing. But the bride? Annabelle was late. First, it was 10 more minutes. Then it became, her makeup artist is still finishing up. Then, silence. Tundday paced behind the stage, smiling for cameras but checking his phone every 2 seconds. "Where's my wife?" he muttered. Still, no sign. The planner came to whisper, "She's almost here," but her face said something different. Then, finally, after almost an hour, the bridal car arrived. People rushed closer. Phones were raised. The camera crew repositioned themselves. The driver stepped out quickly, not looking up. Tundday reached the door first, his jaw tight, his mind racing with thoughts of how to still salvage the mood once she stepped out. He opened the car door, and to his surprise, the seat was empty. Nothing. No veil. No gown. No bride. Just a folded piece of paper on the seat. Tunday's world slowed. His fingers trembled as he reached for the note. He opened it. Neat handwriting. "I'm sorry it had to get to this, but you deserve worse." Flashback. 6 years ago, Lagos mainland, Alagomeji. It started with a compliment. "You are a tailor, right? But you are not dressed like a tailor. You dress like a brand." That was the first thing Tundday ever said to her. Mariam laughed shyly, standing by the roadside. She wasn't used to attention, not the confident kind. She had just finished delivering a client's dress to Yaba when she stopped by the car wash to wait for her Bolt. Tunda was the driver. His grin was lazy, his eyes are bold. He didn't look like much, but he looked at her like she mattered. Tundday called her designer BAE. He'd swing by her workspace sometimes with food and drinks. Sometimes help her deliver heavy sewing machines during fittings and stay late while she fixes zips and pressed gowns. "You know, one day it will be you and Lisa Folawio for the same runway, Abi," he'd say, taking photos of her work. "You just need small capital, a studio, Instagram branding." Mariam had never had someone hype her like that. Her father was dead. Her aunt, who she lived with, called fashion design a waste of cloth and time. But Tunda, he said she had magic in her hands. And when he kissed her one night outside her flat, she believed him even more. 3 months later, they were inseparable. She was saving. Small. 20,000 here, 30,000 there. Her dream was simple. Open a small studio, 1 changing room, a full mirror, a fan that actually worked. Tundday said, "Let me help you manage the money. I know how to run a business. Let me negotiate the rent, the tailor salaries, the branding. Just focus on sewing." She hesitated. He looked her in the eye and said, "Babe, you trust me, right?" She nodded. She handed over 3.5 million in total, her life savings. It started small delays in renting the space, a few phone calls not picked. Then the stories began. The agent said they need extra 300K. "I need to clear the machine from Cotonou." My guy said the carpenter go do better job, just needs advance. But Mariam never saw the studio. Not even once. Then came the first full day she didn't hear from him. Then 2. Then a week. When she finally went to his so-called office, a woman there said, "Tundday, he moved out few days ago." She called again. No answer. She texted, "Where are you? What's happening?" He replied, "Why are you acting like I will run away? You think I stole your money?" And that was it. The last message. She never saw him again. For days, Mariam stayed in bed. She couldn't explain to her aunt, couldn't tell her clients. She stopped posting online, threw her measuring tape in the trash. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the silence. No apology. No remorse. 4 years ago. Ikoyi, Lagos. Joy wore power like perfume. Sharp suits. clean heels. Her skin glowed without trying too hard. She was a senior operations analyst at a commercial bank, 28, focused, responsible, and the breadwinner of her family. Joy didn't do small talk. She didn't do nonsense. And she definitely didn't do broke men. So when she met Tundday at a tech finance mixer, she wasn't looking. But he was. He came in late, in a clean white shirt and fitted trousers. No flashy chains, no loud voice, just a quiet confidence that made him stand out. He offered to refill her Chapman. They exchanged business cards. The next morning, he texted, "Something about your energy stayed with me." And slowly, her guard began to drop. Tundday told her he ran a small import-export business. Started from scratch. Logistics and fast-moving goods. He talked like a man who'd failed, learned, and was now building something honest. When she challenged him on tax structure or market margins, he always had a clean answer. He was smart. He was patient. He listened when she ranted about annoying clients. He prayed with her over the phone before her quarterly pitch. She fell slowly but fully. By month 4, they were practically living together. Then came the idea. One night, over pepper soup and soft jazz, he said, "Babe, what if we created something together? You handle the books, I run the operations. I've got a guy in Turkey that can source electronics at near wholesale. All we need is the capital." Joy didn't answer immediately, but he didn't pressure her. He just kept planting the seed. And when she finally said, "I could take a soft loan from work," he didn't jump. He just said, "Only if you're ready." That made her trust him more. 20 million. That was the figure. She signed for it, backed by her staff benefits. The money entered his business account. She watched him on the phone, negotiating, emailing. She even believed she heard him talking to his supplier. She felt proud, empowered, like they were building an empire. Until the empire vanished. The day it crashed, she was sitting at work when her access badge stopped working. They said the payment for the loan had bounced 3 times. She called Tundday. He didn't pick. She called again. Nothing. By evening, her office was flooded with whispers. By midnight, she received an email. Suspension pending investigation. She went to his flat. It was empty. No clothes, no shoes, nothing. Not even his cologne. Just a folded newspaper on the table and a hand-scribbled note that read, "Joy, you're smarter than this. I thought you'd understand business risks." She fainted on the floor. Joy's family was furious. Her landlord issued a quit notice. By the end of the week, her phone was off, and she was sleeping in a friend's spare room in Sangatedo. Her bright red laptop stayed shut for months as she struggled with depression, but Tundday moved on to his next victim. Annabelle was beautiful, soft-spoken, and most importantly, rich. Her father was a retired contractor with powerful contacts in Abuja and 2 properties in Ikoyi. She was his only daughter, his world, his heir. Her skin glowed. Her English was clean. She drove a Lexus. She owned a skincare business and casually dropped phrases like equity structure in conversations. Tundday was patient with her. He called her queen instead of babe. He wore clean kaftans to Sunday brunch. He listened when she spoke about generational wealth. He never asked for money, not directly, but he mentioned his dream of owning a fleet, a logistics company, a filling station, even a poultry farm at one point. By their 6th month, he had already priced wedding rings. What Annabelle isn't aware of is that she might be falling into the wrong hands and might become the next victim. Jane sat down in Sharon's office as she narrated her ordeal in the hands of Tundday. After Jane told Sharon everything, silence filled the room. Sharon leaned back in her seat, arms crossed, lips pursed as she stared at the phone screen at the video Jane had shakily recorded that evening. The one where a young woman in Tunde's shirt had hurried out of the gate. That woman, Annabelle, had no idea her life was in danger. Not physical danger, but emotional ruin, financial collapse, psychological damage that could take years to rebuild from if she even survived it. Sharon looked at Jane and said, "We need to find her." She hadn't thought that far ahead. But of course, The search began the next morning. They posted Jane's video in the Women Rise private WhatsApp group, asking if any of the women recognized the girl in the video. A few members replied with guesses. By the 7th day, someone replied, "I think that's Annabelle Nouri. She owns Everbliss Skincare, boutique brand in Lekki. Her dad's loaded. That's why she doesn't do too much promo, she's well connected." "Then she's his next jackpot," she whispered. Later on, Sharon drafted out a message and sent to her. DM from @Women Rise Africa. "Hi Annabelle. I know this may seem unusual, but we run a private support circle for women in business. One of our members came across you recently and thought you may be interested in joining our upcoming evening session. It's quiet, empowering, confidential. We'd love to host you. No pressure at all. Sharon." Annabelle saw it. She was curious, not alarmed. She thought maybe it was a networking invite. As far as women are concerned, she might give it a shot, but she didn't reply for 3 days. Then one night after the proposal, she typed back, "Thanks, I may stop by." The Women Rise Africa evening session was held in a quiet, glass-walled space tucked behind a co-working studio in Lekki Phase 1. Inside, the room smelled like fresh paper, lemon candles, and lavender oil. The walls were lined with affirmations, handwritten by previous guests. "I am more than my past. My silence is not permission. Healing is not weakness." Annabelle arrived 15 minutes late. She wore high-waisted jeans, nude flats, and a crisp white shirt. Her hair was up in a bun. Simple, but sharp, the kind of look that said, "I'm just here to observe." She had almost cancelled. Twice. But something in that DM Sharon sent had lingered. Not the words, but the energy. The way it felt less like a pitch and more like a door being held open. She stepped into the room. Soft music was playing. A few women were seated already, some in full glam, others in sweatshirts. Everyone looked different, but there was a strange sameness in their eyes. Like they had all seen something and survived it. A woman with short dreadlocks smiled and handed her a small sticky tag. "Annabelle, right?" She nodded. "Welcome. Just find a seat you're comfortable in." The session began like a wellness talk. Sharon stood in front of the room, tall, poised, calm. They talked about confidence, business, burnout, boundaries. Then, at one point, Sharon said, almost too casually, "We're going to shift gears a little. This part of the evening is called Unmasking the Narrative. It's where women are allowed to share truths not to shame, but to set themselves free." Annabelle sat straighter in her chair. Then Mariam stood up. She spoke softly, about a man she trusted, a man who promised to help her build a studio, who vanished with 3.5 million and left her with no dignity, no money, and no explanation. Annabelle's brow furrowed. She leaned in slightly. Then Joy stood up. He was soft-spoken, told me I was intimidating in the best way, said we'd build a logistics company. I took a 20 million loan for him. I lost my job. I almost lost myself. Annabelle's stomach tightened. Now, the air in the room felt thick. Annabelle shifted in her seat. Her hand reached for her water bottle, but her grip was shaky. Then Sharon spoke again. They didn't know they were dating the same man, not until recently. Different years, different stories, same pattern. Annabelle's eyes darted around. "No." Then, from the front row, another woman stood. "Jane, I didn't lose millions. I lost time. I lost confidence. I lost myself, chasing a man who was planning a wedding with someone else." She paused, then looked directly at Annabelle. "That someone was you." The room fell completely silent. Annabelle's chest tightened. Her pulse raced. Her mouth went dry. No, this can't be. I just got here. You guys don't even know me. We have met anywhere, so I can't be a victim." Jane pulled out her phone, played the video. There it was. Her, in Tunde's shirt, hair scattered, escaping shamefully into the street. That day she thought no one saw her. Annabelle was beginning to run temperature as confusion washed all over her face. Her knees felt weak. She looked at Jane, then at Joy, then at Sharon. "Tundday," she whispered. "It's Tundday." Sharon nodded once. No drama, just the truth. You are about to marry a man who's made a career of destroying women like you. Annabelle covered her mouth, tears welled in her eyes. She turned away, then turned back. Why didn't you stop him earlier? Jane stepped forward, gently. Because until now, we were surviving. But with you, we have a chance to fight back. The plan wasn't impulsive. It was strategic, surgical. Once Annabelle joined the sisterhood of women Tundday had tried to destroy, she didn't spiral into tears, not for long. She sat quietly in the circle that night, listened, and then said the words that would change everything. Let's make him pay, not with noise, but with everything he worships: money, image, and control. Sharon looked at her with slow admiration. You sure you want to go through with this? Annabelle gave a tight smile. And so they planned brick by brick, silently. Annabelle told Tundday she wanted a small but classic wedding. He said no, this was his moment to prove he was a man of class. He insisted on going big, and that played perfectly into their hands. With Annabelle feeding him the dream, they introduced vendors, women who had every reason to want justice. Annabelle suggested a custom bridal textile collection, something unique. Tundday agreed without blinking. He never recognized Mariam when they met. She wore a different hairstyle, and time had hardened her face. She sold him embroidered lace and asso oak at 5 times the price. He paid. As she came highly recommended, Joy helped her inflate the invoice discreetly. Mariam earned back every kobo she lost with interest enough to cover up for devaluation. Joy events and effects. She designed the wedding with cold precision chandeliers, floral structures, LED lights, custom ice sculptures. Tundday approved everything. She billed double, then subcontracted to a cheaper vendor and pocketed the rest. When the final deposit came in, she smiled, leaned back and said, "This is the refund for my stolen shelves." Her job was the hardest and the most beautiful. She continued the act, loved him, smiled at his jokes, let him hold her in public. She complimented his plans, nodded through the lies, held his hand during food tastings. Each time he leaned into her, she whispered softly, "We're going to have the most beautiful wedding." But deep inside, she wasn't preparing for forever. She was building a stage for his execution. Back to the present, the wedding day. Tundday opened the envelope first. A note, in Annabelle's handwriting. "I'm sorry it had to get to this, but you deserve worse." Then he turned over the photo. There they were, Jane, Mariam, Joy, Sharon, seated at a rooftop bar, holding champagne glasses, laughing. Behind them was a banner. To the women who refused to stay broken. The driver got back into the car and drove off. And Tundday? He stood there, photo in hand, note trembling in his fingers, the crowd still watching, confused. He had spent everything. He had tricked everyone. But the people he thought he destroyed, they built their comeback with his foundation.